The morning sun was bright when Samuel Carter, a hard-working black farmer from Georgia, stepped out of the taxi at the small private airport. He held a worn leather bag in one hand and a folder in the other. The folder filled with documents, bank statements, and the final approval letter he had waited months for. Today was supposed to be the biggest day of his life, a day he had dreamed about since he was a boy, for years. He had saved every dollar he could from his farm, working late nights, fixing old tractors, selling crops in local markets, and doing everything possible just to reach this moment. He was finally ready to buy his own small private jet, not for luxury, but to expand his farm business and deliver produce across states. It was a dream built on sweat, sacrifice, and faith. But the moment he walked inside the airport lobby, Samuel knew something was wrong. Two receptionists sitting behind the counter paused their conversation and stared at him with clear confusion. One of them, a tall white woman with sharp eyes, leaned toward the other and whispered something. They both laughed quietly before pretending to straighten papers on the desk. Samuel ignored it and walked up with a polite smile, believing professionalism should be met with professionalism. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm here to meet Mr. Daniels about the jet," he said calmly, handing over his folder. The receptionist didn't touch the folder. She just stared at him, slowly looking him from head to toe, as if trying to understand why someone like him stood there. "Mr. Daniels only meets serious buyers," she said. Her voice filled with cold judgment. Samuel blinked, confused. "I am a serious buyer," he answered gently, pushing the folder closer. "I have an appointment," instead of checking his name. She folded her arms. "You must be in the wrong place," she replied. "Maintenance staff uses the service door outside." Samuel felt a sting in his chest. He had heard comments like this many times in life, but hearing it today, on the day he was finally achieving his dream, hit him differently. Still, he took a deep breath, reminding himself that anger solves nothing. "No, ma'am. I'm not staff," he said softly. "I'm here to buy the jet." The second receptionist let out a small laugh. "A jet?" she repeated loudly. "For you." Another man waiting in the lobby turned to look. Curious and amused, Samuel's heart tightened. But he stood tall, "Yes." "For me," he replied. "I'm meeting Mr. Daniels at 10. The first receptionist finally grabbed the folder with two fingers like it was dirty. She opened it, and for a moment, her confident expression froze. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw the approval letter with the official stamp, the large deposit receipt, and Samuel's farm business registration. But instead of apologizing, she closed the folder and forced a smile. "Wait here," she said stiffly, almost annoyed that he was legitimate. Samuel sat down in the waiting area, but he could still hear the two women whispering, "Can you believe this? He must be scamming someone. No way he can afford it." Their voices cut into him like small knives. He sat quietly, staring at the floor, reminding himself that he had worked harder than any of them could imagine. He had earned every dollar, every sacrifice, every achievement. Minutes passed like hours until Mr. Daniels finally walked into the lobby. He was a confident man in a blue suit, holding a clipboard. The receptionists rushed toward him, whispering again, their eyes turning to Samuel. Daniels frowned and approached Samuel with hesitation. "Sir, I was told you're here about the jet," he asked, almost disbelieving. Samuel stood, cleared his throat, and spoke firmly. "Yes, sir, I'm Samuel Carter." "The one you approved last week." Daniel scanned his clipboard, found the name, and looked up with a puzzled expression. "Oh, yes." "Carter," he said, still sounding unsure. "Please follow me." But he glanced back at the receptionists. There must have been some misunderstanding. Samuel followed him toward the hangar, but behind him, he could still hear one of the receptionists whisper, "He won't buy anything. Just wait." Samuel stopped briefly, closed his eyes, and breathed in deeply. He had faced racism all his life. But today was supposed to be different. Today was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it began with disrespect, humiliation, and disbelief. Little did anyone know that what happened next would shock every single person in that airport. Because Samuel Carter was not alone, and someone powerful was about to walk through those doors, changing everything in one unforgettable moment. Samuel followed Mr. Daniels down the polished hallway that led to the hangar. The sound of airplane engines rumbling outside filled the air like a distant storm. Samuel kept his head high, but inside, he still carried the weight of the disrespect he faced in the lobby. This was supposed to be one of the proudest days of his life. Yet instead, it began with doubt and humiliation. Mr. Daniels walked fast. Flipping through papers on his clipboard, he acted polite, but Samuel could feel the hesitation in every step. It was the same hesitation he had seen in the eyes of many people who underestimated him before, but Samuel stayed calm, remembering his father's words, "Son, the world won't always treat you right, but your actions will speak louder than their doubt." They reached the giant hangar doors. When they opened, sunlight flooded over a sleek white jet parked in the center. Its wings shimmered like polished silver, and its exterior looked untouched and perfect. Samuel took a deep breath, feeling the excitement return for the first time since entering the airport. This was the plane he had saved for, worked for, sacrificed for. The dream, he thought, would never be taken seriously. But before Mr. Daniels could start explaining the jet's features, a sudden commotion echoed from behind them. Loud, hurried footsteps, confused voices, and someone shouting. Samuel turned, and the airport staff were rushing toward the lobby doors, looking shocked, confused, and suddenly nervous. Then the doors swung open. A tall man in a black suit walked in. His presence powerful and commanding, he wore dark sunglasses, and 2 security officers followed closely behind him. Everyone in the lobby froze as the man stopped in front of the reception desk. The 2 receptionists, who had disrespected Samuel earlier, instantly straightened up, fear flashing in their eyes. The man removed his sunglasses slowly, revealing sharp, confident eyes that scanned the room when he spoke. His voice was calm but carried authority strong enough to silence the entire building. "Where is Mr. Samuel Carter?" he asked. The receptionists looked at each other in panic. One pointed weakly toward the hangar hallway. "Huh. He's tie there, sir," she stuttered. The man ignored their trembling voices and walked forward with steady determination. His security team followed behind him like shadows. Back in the hangar, Samuel and Mr. Daniels paused as the same man stepped inside. Mr. Daniels immediately straightened his posture. "Oh, General Lawson," Daniels said quickly, his voice cracking with respect. "We weren't expecting you here today, General Lawson." One of the most powerful military leaders in the entire country nodded without a smile. "I'm not here for business," he replied. "I'm here for Samuel." Samuel blinked in shock. He had not seen General Lawson in almost 8 years, but the general walked straight up to him, and without hesitation, pulled him into a strong embrace. "My boy," Lawson said softly, "you didn't tell me you were buying a jet today." The entire hangar froze. Technicians, staff, and even Daniels stared with wide eyes. Unable to believe what they were seeing, Samuel Carter, the humble black farmer, they all doubted, was being hugged by the nation's most respected military commander. Samuel stepped back, confused. "General, I didn't want to bother you," he said quietly. "I thought I should handle this myself." The general shook his head firmly. "You should never face this world alone," he said. "Not after everything your father did for me." Mr. Daniels swallowed hard, realizing this situation was much bigger than he thought. He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, General Lawson, Samuel is here for the Falcon jet, the model we discussed weeks ago," but the general held up one hand. "I know," he said, "and that is why I came." He turned to Samuel, his expression serious. "You deserve respect, and I will personally make sure you receive it right then." The 2 receptionists who had insulted Samuel earlier walked nervously into the hangar, their faces pale, hands shaking, knowing exactly what was coming. The general looked at them with calm disappointment. "Did you treat this man with dignity?" he asked, his tone quiet but sharp. Neither woman could speak. They simply lowered their heads. General Lawson stepped closer. "You judged him by his skin and his clothes," he said. "Not knowing he is the son of a man who once saved my life." Samuel looked down. Overwhelmed, he had never told anyone at the airport about his father's past. His father, Sergeant Elijah Carter, had been a hero during his military service. He saved General Lawson during a dangerous mission many years ago. But Samuel never used that story to gain special treatment. He believed in earning respect, not demanding it. The general placed a strong hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Your father would be proud," he said, "and today you will be treated with the honor he left behind." Everyone in the hangar remained silent. The receptionist trembled. Daniels wiped sweat from his forehead. And every worker stood still, waiting. The general turned to the staff. "From this moment forward," he said firmly, "Mr. Samuel Carter is to be given full respect and priority." Then he added with a voice that echoed across the hangar, "And anyone who disrespects him will answer to me." Samuel felt the air shift around him. Asterisk. The humiliation from earlier slowly turned into something powerful. He finally felt seen, valued, and protected. This was no longer just a day to buy a jet. It was the day the world learned who he truly was. And the shocking turn of events had only just begun. The hangar felt different now. The air that once held quiet judgment was now filled with tension. Respect and curiosity, everyone watched Samuel with new eyes, as if he had suddenly transformed from an ordinary customer into someone extraordinary. But Samuel himself stood silently, trying to understand why General Lawson had come all this way just for him. The general adjusted his sleeves and looked around the hangar. "Let's continue," he said calmly. "Samuel deserves the full presentation." Mr. Daniels nodded quickly and signaled the staff, who hurried to prepare the jet tour. They wiped the jet's exterior, opened its door, and powered up the cockpit screens, trying to make everything perfect as they worked. Samuel turned to the general. "Sir, I don't understand," he said softly. "How did you even know I was here?" The general smiled faintly. "I've been following your progress for years," he replied. "Your father asked me to keep an eye on you, make sure the world doesn't break your spirit." Samuel's chest tightened. His father had passed away 5 years earlier, leaving a silence on the farm that Samuel never fully recovered from. Hearing the general speak about him felt like a door opening to memories Samuel kept locked away. The general continued, "When I heard you were finally buying your own jet, I knew this was an important day in your life." He looked toward the lobby, where the two receptionists stood nervously at a distance, "And when I saw how you were treated, I knew I could not stay silent." Samuel nodded quietly, grateful but still confused. He had survived prejudice his whole life without expecting anyone to intervene. He had always believed that a man should earn respect through action, not connections. But today, he was learning something new. Sometimes support was not a weakness but a blessing. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat and motioned toward the jet. "If we can begin the demonstration," he said, trying to sound steady. Samuel and the general followed him up the steps, into the aircraft. Inside, the jet was spacious, bright, and carefully designed. Cream-colored leather seats lined the cabin, each stitched with fine precision. Soft lights glowed from the ceiling, and small windows let in golden sunlight. A large screen on the wall displayed flight maps and performance data. It was more beautiful than Samuel had imagined. Mr. Daniels spoke quickly, trying to recover his professional tone. "This model can travel across the country without refueling," he explained. "It uses advanced engines for efficiency, perfect for business transport." Samuel nodded, touched the smooth surface of the table, and imagined loading his fresh produce, delivering it directly to stores, and expanding his farm beyond anything he had ever dreamed. But behind his excitement, he could still feel the quiet sting of the disrespect from earlier. No matter how beautiful the jet was, he could not forget being treated like he didn't belong here. The general sensed his silence. "Samuel," he said gently, "you don't need their approval to be worthy." Samuel looked at him. "I know," he answered, "but it still hurts." The general placed a hand on his shoulder. "You must remember something," he said. "Your achievements are louder than their ignorance." Then he added, "Your father used to say the same thing whenever someone doubted him." Samuel's eyes softened. He remembered the long nights working with his father, the calloused hands, the quiet laughs, the lessons in courage and humility. His father always believed that a man's value came from his heart and his work, not from who judged him. The jet demonstration continued as technicians explained fuel capacity, emergency systems, and cockpit features. Samuel listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions, which surprised the staff. They had assumed he wouldn't understand technical details. But Samuel had studied aviation for months, preparing for this day. When the tour ended, Mr. Daniels hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Carter," he said slowly, "we apologize for the misunderstanding earlier." He tried to smile, but it felt forced. Samuel looked at him calmly and replied, "A misunderstanding happens once," he said softly. "What happened in the lobby was not a misunderstanding." Silence filled the cabin. Daniel swallowed and looked down, knowing Samuel was right. The general's voice came next, firm and steady. "Actions have consequences," he said, "but today's not about punishment. It is about Samuel." They stepped out of the jet and walked back into the hangar. More staff had gathered now, whispering among themselves, shocked by how everything had changed. Samuel felt their eyes on him, but this time, the looks were different. Not mocking. Not doubtful, respectful, curious, even impressed. The general turned to Samuel with a small smile. "You've come far," he said. "And you're about to go even further." Samuel breathed deeply, feeling strength he hadn't felt in years. For the first time today, he believed it fully. But the day was far from over, because just as he stepped down from the jet stairs, a man in a gray suit rushed into the hangar. Shouting Samuel's name in panic, everyone turned, and the news he carried would change everything again. The story was not done surprising them, not even close. The man in the gray suit sprinted across the hangar floor, his shoes echoing sharply against the concrete. His face was pale, and sweat covered his forehead as if he had run from the other side of the airport without stopping. Everyone turned to look at him, confused by the urgency in his eyes. Samuel froze at the bottom of the jet stairs, unsure whether this man brought good news or bad news. The man gasped for air before finally speaking. "Mr. Carter," he said loudly, "you need to come with me right away." Samuel frowned, startled. "What happened?" he asked, his voice steady but tense. Before the man could answer, General Lawson stepped forward. "Who are you?" the general demanded, his tone calm but commanding. The man straightened instantly, recognizing the authority standing before him. "SRI, Robert Hayes. Assistant Director of Airport Security," he said nervously. "We have a situation concerning Mr. Carter's farm." Samuel's heart jumped painfully in his chest. "My farm?" he repeated, struggling to breathe. "Yes, sir," Hayes said. "We received a report a few minutes ago, something urgent." General Lawson narrowed his eyes. "What kind of report?" he asked. Hayes swallowed hard. "There's been an incident," he said slowly. "A fire broke out near your main field. And your workers have been trying to stop it?" Samuel felt the world tilt under his feet. A fire on his farm, the land he had spent his whole life building, the crops he depended on, the place where his father had once stood, laughing, teaching, believing in him. His throat tightened and his palms went cold. "Is everyone safe?" Samuel asked, his voice shaking for the first time that day. Hayes hesitated. "We don't have full details yet," he admitted. "But the fire is spreading faster than expected." The hangar fell silent. Even the technicians, who had been busy working moments ago, now stood completely still, watching Samuel with concern. The general stepped closer to Samuel. "Look at me," he said gently. "We will handle this." "No," Samuel replied quickly. "I need to get back right now." Hayes nodded. "We have a car ready outside to take you, Mr. Carter," he said. "But there's something else." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "What else?" he asked. Hayes looked at the general nervously, as if afraid to speak in his presence. But General Lawson gestured firmly. "Say it," he commanded. Hayes took a slow breath. "We reviewed the call recordings, sir," he said, "and we believe the fire might not be an accident." A ripple of shock moved through the hangar. Samuel felt his stomach twist violently. "Not an accident?" he whispered. Hayes nodded. "Someone called in a threat before the fire started," explained. "The voice mentioned your expansion, your new business deals, and your jet purchase." The general's jaw tightened. "So someone wanted to stop him," he said coldly. Hayes nodded again. It seems that way. Samuel felt rage rise inside him. Not loud, not wild, but deep, steady, powerful. He had worked honestly his whole life. He had endured disrespect, faced racism, survived hardship, and rebuilt his family farm from nothing. But now someone had dared to attack the land his father left behind. Someone had crossed a line that could not be ignored. He straightened his back slowly. "Let's go," he said quietly. The general stepped beside him. "I'm coming with you," he said. "You won't face this alone." Hayes nodded and motioned for them to follow him toward the exit. Samuel walked with fast steps, his mind racing through memories of the farm, the smell of fresh soil, the long rows of crops stretching under the morning sun. His father's voice telling him that land was more than property, it was identity, heritage, and responsibility as they approached the hangar doors. One of the receptionists stepped forward nervously. "Mr. Carter," she whispered, We're very sorry for how we treated you earlier." But Samuel didn't stop walking. He didn't need their apologies now. His farm needed him, outside. A black SUV waited with its engine running. The driver opened the back door quickly. But before Samuel entered, Mr. Daniels hurried outside. "Breathless, Mr. Carter," he called out. "Your jet, it'll be ready whenever you need it." Samuel nodded without speaking. Today, the jet no longer mattered. His home did. The general climbed into the SUV beside him. As the vehicle pulled away from the airport, sirens echoed in the distance. Samuel stared out the window, his hand shaking slightly. He didn't know who had started the fire. He didn't know how much land he had lost. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone had tried to break him today, and he would find out who. The journey back to the farm would take time, but the storm inside his heart had already begun. And when he arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. The SUV raced down the long highway, its tires humming loudly against the asphalt. Samuel sat in the back seat, staring straight ahead, his jaw tense, his fingers gripping the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. Beside him, General Lawson watched silently. Understanding the storm in Samuel's heart without needing any words, the driver pressed the accelerator harder as dark smoke appeared in the distant sky, rising like a heavy black cloud swallowing the sun. Samuel's heart sank. "That's my land," he whispered. The closer they got, the thicker the air felt, filled with smoke, fear, and the weight of uncertainty. "Stay calm," the general said softly. "We will face it together." Samuel closed his eyes briefly. But the image of flames dancing across his fields kept flashing in his mind like a nightmare he couldn't escape. He had put everything he owned into that farm, every morning, every night. Every drop of sweat from his father's hands still lived in that soil. To see it burning felt like losing a piece of himself. As they turned onto the dirt road leading to the farm, chaos greeted them. Fire trucks lined the field edges. Firefighters shouted orders, sirens screamed, and the orange glow of burning crops lit up the sky like a second sunset. Samuel jumped out of the SUV before it even stopped, running toward the nearest fire truck. A firefighter grabbed his arm, stopping him. "Sir, you can't go in there," he said firmly. "It's too dangerous. That's my land," Samuel said. Breathlessly, "My workers, are they safe?" "We evacuated the crew," the firefighter replied quickly. "No one is hurt so far." Relief washed over Samuel, but it was short-lived. His eyes stared at the flames tearing through rows of crops he had spent a lifetime growing. The fire crackled loudly, the heat so intense he felt it from meters away. It was like watching years of work disappear in front of him, swallowed by fire he didn't cause. General Lawson walked up beside him. "How bad is it?" the general asked the firefighter. The firefighter shook his head grimly. "We're doing everything we can, sir," he said, but the fire started in multiple places at once. Which is unusual. Samuel heard the unspoken message. Someone started it. Someone wanted this. Someone wanted to break him on the same day he tried to rise higher. He clenched his fists. "Why would anyone do this to me?" he whispered. The general looked at him seriously. "Success attracts enemies," he said, "especially when those enemies don't want to see a black farmer rise beyond what they think you deserve." Samuel swallowed hard. Feeling anger mixed with heartbreak, He had worked honestly his whole life, never hurting anyone, but someone, somewhere, had been watching him and waiting for the moment to strike. Hayes, the airport security officer, arrived minutes later in another vehicle. Holding a tablet in his hand, he jogged towards Samuel and the general. Coughing from the thick smoke, "Mr. Carter," he said, "we reviewed some traffic cameras near your property." Samuel looked at him sharply. "What did you find?" he asked. Hayes turned the screen toward them. The grainy video showed a pickup truck driving slowly near the outer fields before the fire started. The truck stopped for a moment, then sped away. The license plate was partially visible, but not enough to read clearly. But the symbol on the back was unmistakable, a local group known for harassing minority-owned farms in the area. Samuel felt a chill run through him. "I know that symbol," he said quietly. "They came to my farm once before, shouting, threatening." Hayes nodded. "We believe they might be involved." The general stepped forward, his voice deep and steady. "They attacked government land years ago," he said. "This is more than hate. This is organized." Samuel looked toward the burning fields, anger rising slowly like a tide. He had faced ignorance, disrespect, and humiliation many times, but this was different. This was not words, not insults, not judging glances. This was destruction aimed at breaking his spirit, and he refused to let them win. The firefighters finally managed to slow the flames, pushing them away from the farmhouse and the equipment barn. Smoke rolled across the field like thick gray fog. Crops were charred, leaves were ashes, and the air smelled of ruin. One of Samuel's workers, an elderly man named Lewis, approached him trembling. "Boss," he said, his voice cracking, "we tried everything. But the fire. It was too fast." Samuel placed a steady hand on Lewis's shoulder. "You did your best," he said quietly. "That's all that matters." Lewis looked at the general, confused and surprised. "Is that really General Lawson?" He whispered, "Yes." Samuel answered simply, "He's here to help." The general nodded respectfully to the workers. "We will rebuild," he promised. "And we will find the people who did this." Samuel exhaled slowly as the last flames died down. Black smoke drifted into the darkening sky. His fields were wounded, but not dead. His hope was shaken, but not gone. Someone had tried to break him today, but all they had done was awaken a fire inside him stronger than the one they set. And tomorrow, the real fight would begin. The night settled slowly over the farm, wrapping the burned fields in a heavy darkness that felt colder than usual. The flashing lights of fire trucks dimmed one by one as firefighters packed their hoses. Their faces tired but sympathetic, Samuel stood silently in the middle of what used to be his proud harvest. Now reduced to blackened soil and scorched stalks, the smoke rose in thin gray lines, drifting into the night sky like quiet ghosts of everything he had built. General Lawson remained beside him, hands clasped behind his back, watching Samuel with a mixture of concern and respect. "Take your time," the general said softly. "This kind of loss is hard." Samuel nodded but didn't speak. His throat felt tight, and every breath carried memories of the land he had worked since he was a boy. This was more than lost crops. This was history, family, and sacrifice burned in front of him. After several minutes of silence, Samuel finally whispered, "I promised my father I would take this farm further than he ever could." The general stepped closer. "You have," he replied. "This fire doesn't erase your success." But Samuel wasn't convinced. He knelt down, lifted a handful of the darkened soil, and let it fall through his fingers. "These fields fed entire towns," he murmured. "Now look at them." Before the general could respond, Hayes, the airport security officer, walked toward them with a tablet and a flashlight. "Mr. Carter," Hayes said quietly, "we discovered something else." Samuel stood up quickly. "What now?" he asked, bracing himself. Hayes turned the tablet around to reveal new footage from another highway camera. This time the video was clearer. The same pickup truck with the hateful symbol could be seen leaving Samuel's land minutes after the fire started. But something else caught their eyes. A second vehicle followed behind a black SUV with tinted windows. Moving slowly, as if supervising, The general leaned closer. "That's not just some hate group," he said sharply. "That's coordination." Hayes nodded. "Exactly," he said, and we tracked the SUV's route. It headed straight toward the city industrial district. Samuel's anger grew deeper. "So someone powerful is behind this," he said. "They wanted to hurt me." The general placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "They wanted to scare you," he corrected. "There's a difference, but they failed," he added. "You're still standing." Samuel took a shaky breath and looked toward the farmhouse where his workers had gathered. They were tired, covered in soot. But loyal as ever, some sat on wooden crates. Some leaned on tools, others watched the firefighters leave. Their eyes carried the same fear Samuel felt, the fear of losing everything they depended on. Samuel approached them slowly. Lewis, the elderly worker, stood up immediately. "Boss," he said softly, "tell us what to do next." Samuel looked at the faces around him, men and women who had supported his farm through storms, droughts, long nights, and endless labor. They believed in him, they trusted him, and he refused to let the fire end their future. "We rebuild," Samuel said firmly, his voice carrying strength he didn't know he still had. The workers nodded, some wiping tears, others clenching their fists in determination. The general stepped forward, addressing them like a commander before a battle. "You are not alone," he said. "This farm will rise again, and we will make sure the people responsible are found." Hayes joined in. "We'll increase patrol in the area," he promised, "and I'll work with the county sheriff to track these vehicles." Samuel felt something shift inside him, a spark of hope pushing through the ashes. He turned to the general. "Why would someone go this far?" he asked. "It's only a farm." The general shook his head. "It's not only a farm," he said. "It's a symbol. You're a black man expanding your business, buying a jet, growing beyond limits others set for you. That scares some people." Samuel looked back at the damaged land. "So they tried to tear it down," he whispered. "But they don't know me." The general smiled faintly. "No," he said. "They don't, but they'll learn." They walked toward the farmhouse, lit by a single bulb glowing on the porch. Samuel's crew gathered around him again, waiting for guidance. He lifted his voice so everyone could hear. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "we start cleaning this land. We start planting again. We rebuild from nothing if we have to." And then he added, his voice filled with quiet fire, "But I'm also going to find out who did this, and when I do, they'll wish they never stepped foot on this soil." The workers nodded, feeling strength return to their tired bodies. The general placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder once more. "And I'll stand with you," he said. Night deepened around them, but the fire in Samuel's heart only grew brighter. He would rebuild his farm, he would protect his people, and he would expose whoever dared to destroy his life's work. The ashes beneath his feet were not an ending. They were the beginning of a war he never asked for, but one he was now ready to fight. Dawn broke with a soft orange glow spreading across the horizon. Samuel had barely slept, but he stood outside before sunrise. Watching the first light fall on the burned fields, the ashes looked cold now. But Samuel could still feel the heat of yesterday's flames in his memory. His workers slowly gathered behind him, determined but exhausted, ready to begin the long day ahead. General Lawson walked out of the farmhouse with a firm expression. He had stayed the night to watch over Samuel, refusing to leave until they uncovered the truth behind the fire. Hayes arrived not long after, carrying a folder under his arm and with 2 state investigators behind him. "Mr. Carter," Hayes called out. "We found something important." Samuel turned quickly, his heart pounding with anticipation and dread. "Tell me," he said, trying to stay calm. Hayes opened the folder, revealing printed images, maps, and a report marked confidential. "We traced the black SUV," Hayes began. "The one following the pickup truck." He pointed at a map. "It belongs to a corporation in the city, Helix Agro Industries." Samuel narrowed his eyes. "I know that name," he said quietly. "They tried to buy my land last year." Hayes nodded. "And you refused their offer," he said. "You told them you would never sell." Samuel clenched his jaw. They didn't like hearing that. The general stepped forward. "Helix Agro," he repeated slowly. "They've been trying to take over small farms across the county." His eyes hardened. And now we know they're using dirty tactics, Hayes continued. We also discovered that Helix Agro hired a local extremist group for field pressure, he explained. That group is the same one you recognized, the ones who harassed you months ago. Samuel felt anger rise in his chest. So Helix paid those men to burn my fields, he said softly. To force me into selling, his workers behind him gasped quietly. Shock spreading through the group, the general slammed the folder shut. This is organized sabotage, he said. This is crime, but we need more evidence to take them down. Hayes looked around. Lowering his voice, we might have that, he said. There is a witness. A witness. Samuel repeated, surprised. Hayes nodded and motioned toward his car. A young man stepped out slowly, his clothes covered in soot and dirt. His eyes red from smoke and fear. This is Miguel, Hayes said. He works part-time on a ranch near your property. Miguel stepped forward. Shaking slightly, his voice trembled as he spoke. Mr. Carter, he said, I saw them. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. Saw who? He asked gently. Miguel swallowed hard. The men who started the fire, he whispered. I was riding home when I saw two of them pouring fuel along your fields. He looked at Samuel with desperate eyes. And I saw the man in the black SUV watching them. The general stepped closer. Can you describe him? He asked. Miguel nodded. He was tall, wore a suit, and had a scar on his left cheek. Samuel froze. He knew that description. It belonged to the same Helix representative who had visited his farm last year to pressure him to sell. A man named Victor Lang, cold-eyed, arrogant, and ruthless. It's him, Samuel said quietly, anger deepening in his voice. Victor Lang, the general nodded, confirming the seriousness of the situation. This man has crossed a line, he said, and he thinks he can get away with it. Hayes placed a protective hand on Miguel's shoulder. He's scared, Hayes explained. He came forward because he saw how fast the fire spread. He thought someone might die, Miguel's voice cracked. I didn't want anything to happen to your workers, he said, or your home. Samuel stepped forward and placed a reassuring hand on Miguel's arm. You did the right thing, he said warmly. You may have saved lives. The general straightened his stance. Now that we have a witness, he said. We can open a full investigation, but we must be careful, he warned. Helix Agro is powerful, wealthy, and connected. Samuel's workers gathered closer. Listening silently, some looked fearful, others furious. One spoke up. Boss, what if they come back? Samuel turned to them, his expression strong. They already tried to break us once, he said quietly. But we are still here, still standing, and we will not back down. The general nodded in agreement. We'll arrange protection, he said. No one will harm this farm again. Samuel took a deep breath as the morning sun rose higher. Lighting the ashes around him, it was a painful sight, but also a reminder that he had survived the worst. And now he had a direction, a target, an enemy whose mask had finally fallen. This was no longer about a burned field. This was a battle for justice, for his father's legacy. For every worker who depended on the land for survival, Samuel looked at the horizon with fire in his eyes. We rebuild today, he said firmly, but tomorrow, we fight back. The workers nodded, their fear replaced by determination. The general smiled proudly, and Miguel looked relieved. Knowing he wasn't alone anymore, Samuel Carter was ready. Helix Agro had started a war. But Samuel would finish it, and the truth, the full truth, was about to shake the whole county and expose the corruption lurking behind powerful doors. The battle was coming, and Samuel was no longer fighting alone. Morning turned into afternoon as workers cleaned the burned soil, every shovel of ash, every torn root. Every charred plant reminded Samuel why he could not let this crime go unanswered. The farm was wounded, but not dead, and Samuel Carter stood in the center of his land like a man reborn. Stronger, steadier, and ready to defend what was his. General Lawson gathered Samuel, Hayes, and Miguel under the shade of an old oak near the property line. The air smelled of smoke and dust, but the wind carried a new feeling, determination. We move now, the general said quietly. Before Helix Agro destroys evidence, Hayes opened his folder. Revealing a new document stamped Urgent Warrant Request. "We have everything we need," Hayes said. "Witness testimony, camera footage, motive." In their history of harassment, Miguel lowered his head nervously. "What if they come after me?" he whispered. Samuel placed a firm, reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're under our protection now," Samuel said. "No one touches you," Miguel nodded, comforted by the strength in Samuel's voice. The general cleared his throat. "Let's expose Victor Lang," he said. Today, they drove to the city. The SUV speeding down the open highway, Samuel stared out the window. Watching the scenery blur, dry roads, tall buildings, passing cars. But his mind was focused only on one thing: justice. Helix Agro Industries stood like a fortress of steel and glass in the center of the city. Its tall walls and sharp angles reflected power, wealth, and greed. Samuel stepped out of the SUV. His boots hitting the pavement with purpose. People passing by glanced at him. Unaware of the storm he carried inside the lobby, a receptionist looked at them with polite confusion. "Welcome to Helix Agro. Do you have an appointment?" she asked. The general simply showed his badge. Her face turned pale. "Oh, of course, sirs." "Please go ahead," she stammered. They took the elevator to the top floor. Each second felt heavy, like the calm before thunder. Samuel's heart thumped, not with fear, but with fire. This was the man who burned his land, who tried to scare him, who believed he could destroy a black farmer and walk away untouched. When the elevator doors opened, Victor Lang stood in his glass office. Sipping coffee casually, as if he owned the world, he turned, expecting a business meeting. Instead, he froze. His eyes landed first on General Lawson, then on Hayes, then on Samuel, and for the first time, fear flickered behind his confident mask. "What's the meaning of this?" Victor asked sharply. Hayes stepped forward. Reading from a document, Victor Lang, "You are under investigation for conspiracy, property destruction, hate-motivated harassment, and arson." Victor laughed bitterly. "You have no proof," he said. "You're wasting your time." Miguel stepped out from behind Samuel. "We have proof," he said quietly. Victor's smirk disappeared. His eyes widened in recognition. "You," he muttered. "You were there." Hayes placed the footage on Victor's desk. The pickup truck, the SUV, the symbol. The time stamp, everything. Victor's face turned white. It's not," he stuttered. But the general's voice cut through the air. "Enough," he said firmly. "You targeted Samuel because you feared his success." Samuel stepped forward. Their eyes locked. For a moment, the entire room fell silent. "You burned my land," Samuel said in a calm, steady voice. "You tried to destroy my father's legacy. You tried to break me." Victor swallowed hard, unable to speak. His arrogance vanished. Replaced by the truth he could no longer hide, the general nodded to Hayes. "Take him," he ordered. 2 officers entered, placing Victor in handcuffs. His voice trembled as they led him out. "You don't understand," he barked, desperate now. "It's business, nothing personal." Samuel shook his head slowly. "It was personal to me," he said softly, "and now you answer for it." When Victor was taken away, the office felt strangely quiet. Hayes exhaled in relief. "It's over," he said, but the general corrected him. "No," he replied, "it's the beginning." Outside, reporters gathered quickly, alerted by the arrest. They rushed toward Samuel, microphones raised. "Mr. Carter, is it true your farm was targeted? Did Helix Agro burn your fields? Are you pressing charges?" Samuel stood tall, looking directly into the cameras. "Yes," he said, "my farm was attacked. Yes, they tried to break me, but they failed." He paused, letting the world hear him. "I will rebuild my farm. I will protect my workers, and I will keep growing, no matter who tries to stop me," reporters murmured, impressed. Inspired, energized, the general placed a proud hand on Samuel's back. Miguel stood beside him, safe and no longer afraid. As they walked away from the cameras, Samuel felt something powerful rise inside him. Not anger, not revenge, but victory. Back at the farm, the workers cheered as Samuel returned. Lewis hugged him tightly, tears in his eyes. "We heard the news, boss," he said. You did it. Samuel looked at the burned fields, then at the people who believed in him. We all did it, he said, voice steady and warm. Now we rebuild. It was with the sun setting behind him, casting a golden glow across the ashes. Samuel Carter stepped forward, ready to plant again, ready to rise again, ready to live again. Because no fire, no hatred, no enemy could stop a man who refused to bow. And Samuel Carter would rise higher than ever, one seed, one field, one victory at a time.